You may be wondering, how long is deprogramming? How long do you need to be recovering from a cult? How long is recovery from recovery? Hi, I'm Kirsten. Welcome to Sobriety Bestie Podcast. Today, we're going to be looking at a cult recovery checklist to see where you may be at in your cult recovery journey. For context, I was in AA for 10 and a half years and I left AA 5.5 years ago. I am still on my deprogramming journey. The majority of my deprogramming happened the first year, and then I just kind of moved on with my life. And at 5 years sober from AA, at 5 years after I left AA, I started dissenting online. And so as a process of making content on the internet, I've gone deep into the literature and I've grown and deprogrammed a lot more. More was revealed. I had a lot more to recover that I wasn't aware of. And so when I've looked at a lot of the cult experts, there's not like one set time on like how long to recover from something. Obviously, recovery is not, it takes 3.7 years, like period, like everybody is individual. And really, the factors that go into how long recovery is going to take from a cult or from AA or deprogramming is how long were you in the program? Like, how exposed to the thought reform were you? How deep in the program were you? So for me, I was a true believer. I was at the center of it. For a decade, I believed basically that AA was true. Well, I mean, it took a little while to get fully indoctrinated into true believer status. But yeah, I believed it was all true, so it was quite destabilizing and shocking when I left AA in April of 2020. And just this week, I was curious of this question myself. How much deprogramming is there on the horizon for me? I also want to say, by the way, that I love the deprogramming journey in that it is a unique like evolution in which we keep getting free. The more that we do the deprogramming work, the more we wake up to more pockets of freedom. So I really love that. I love getting free. I love evolving. And so I am like happily and delightfully like on this journey. So I don't look at it as like a bad thing, right? Even when I was overcoming my anxiety disorders, like part of my head was like, how long is this going to take? But then like the rest of me was like, I don't care how long it takes to stop having anxiety attacks. That's my only goal, is to like get out of the anxiety hell. And that's how I feel about deprogramming from AA or cult recovery is I don't really care how long it takes. I'm just going to keep doing the work and keep getting free and like not concern myself with like a time. But as far as like what cult recovery specialists or experts say, I've read that they think that maybe like obviously the first month or two, it could be very intense. And then the first year or two, there's a lot of stabilization happening and identity and a lot of work to be done. And then longer term, people say 5, 6, even like 10 years. Some cult experts say it is about a 10-year recovery process. Now, look, if you were only in AA or in the cult that you were in for like, I don't know, like 5 months, it's going to be different than somebody like me who was like a full-on true believer for a decade, right? So it is going to vary and be individual. But so I was curious myself, like, what does the rest of my deprogramming look like? So I worked with AI and what I know from various books from cult experts that I've read to come up with a checklist that was going to help me figure out where I'm at on my own journey. And I happened to mention it in a live stream on YouTube. And then the people, maybe it was you, were saying, I want to know what the cult recovery checklist is that you are using to assess where you're at. And literally what I did is I went down the checklist and I just like checked the ones that I am still need to work on, that I got a lot of freedom left on. So like areas for me to focus on as I continue to evolve out of Alcoholics Anonymous ideology. We're going to start off with phase 1, which is stabilization. So if you are just leaving a cult or you're just leaving Alcoholics Anonymous or a 12-step program, these are some of the things that might be on your checklist. Okay, number 1 is to break physical contact with the group. So in my case, that would be stop going to meetings. Number 2, break psychological submission to group authority. So no longer submitting to your sponsor. 3, stop consuming group literature and messages. So no more meetings, no more reading the big book, maybe even unfollowing social media groups that talk about the literature, right? 4, create a safe physical and digital environment. So this would be the same. Like for digital environment, maybe unsubscribe from 12-step groups online or cult groups online. And for me, what I did was, I was in some groups around sobriety that were like AA focused. I like unjoined those groups or exited those groups. Some people also like to block all of their AA friends on their social media. I didn't do that. I just didn't say anything actually for 5 years. And when I did finally say something on the internet, they just blocked me. I didn't have to block anybody. They self-selected. But cleaning up your digital environment and cleaning up your physical environment. So maybe this is like if you have a little like, I don't know, like a shrine area or like candles and you have like your sobriety chips there. Just think like, does this still feel like it honors me? Does this feel like a reminder of the group that I no longer want to be tied to? Or does this feel still something I want in my life? Okay, 5 is identify any phobias or catastrophic predictions installed by the group. For me, the phobia indoctrination that I had in AA was essentially that I was going to die if I left the group. So I was told repeatedly, jails, institutions, death. If you don't do AA, if you don't work it while you're in it, or if you actually leave AA. So I actually believed at my core that to leave was to die, but I left anyways because I knew it was baloney. So some people, when they're leaving 12-step, they feel like they're going to go insane, or literally their sponsors. I heard from somebody yesterday where her sponsor literally told her that. So what's helpful is to write down what fears you have with leaving your group. If you're at the stabilization phase, what am I afraid of with leaving this group? What fears are coming up for me? Going insane, getting institutionalized, getting arrested, drinking, relapsing, dying. I wasn't even so much that I was afraid of drinking. I was afraid of dying, although obviously that promise that they had for me was that if I drink, then I would die. But yeah, so get clear on the fears and phobias that the group likely installed through the indoctrination process. Next, do a reality test with those predictions with evidence. So like for me, I was like, well, is there any proof that, like, what did the other people say about addiction? Is it really a forever recovery model? Who else has a forever recovery model? Like, I need to stay in AA forever, otherwise I'm going to drink and die. Like, what did science say about the brain and addiction and long-term recovery or other recovery paths? What do they say? So I got interested in doing research. I definitely recommend that. I have other content that goes into other methodologies and books that we've read about addiction and stuff that you can check out on my AA alternative playlist. Next is build immediate safety, housing, food, and finances. This is especially relevant if you are one of the people who is, for example, living with your sponsor and you're leaving 12-step. So yeah, there are basics that need to be worked out if you're going to leave. If you're going to escape a cult, there might be some fundamental basic needs that need to be worked through to make sure that you're okay. Next is reduced exposure to triggering settings, people, or rituals. Now, this can vary depending upon your circumstances and what your life is like. So maybe the best thing to do here is to create a list, if that feels like it's relevant for you, of what are triggering settings, people, and rituals. Like for me, it wasn't right away that I stopped praying, but it was like after leaving that I decided to not pray anymore. And so really looking at this prayer ritual I have, I started to see it more as giving away my power. Instead of making a decision, I was asking for guidance to make a decision, and that didn't feel true to me anymore. So I was noticing when in my thinking, I was still doing the rituals of Alcoholics Anonymous, and just getting clear on like what's me and what's the group and what do I want going forward, like an inventory. And next is begin observing your thoughts without judging them as good or bad. Oof, this one was huge because so much of like 12-step was in moral inventories, nightly inventories, daily inventories, your side of the street, what's your part, all that stuff. So yeah, getting comfortable with my own thinking and knowing, like, obviously trusting your own thinking, and it can be a lot to work through. And if this one is vibing with you, it's an invitation to be more aware of what your thought process is and how it relates to the group that you're leaving. Next is name the group as high control without self-blame. So right away when I left AA, I realized it was 100% a high control group. That was very, very helpful for me to identify AA as a high control group. It was only later that I dug further into the literature and I realized that, oh, I see that it checks all the checklists for a cult. It's actually a cult. And understanding it as a cult actually was very, very helpful for me because it gave me a frame of reference for healing, like what we're doing right here, right now. Phase 2 is cognitive deconstruction. So learn about thought reform and undue influence. Start to see how your thoughts were reformed in the group that you were in and learn about the process. If it was AA or 12-step, right? So I did a specific playlist on Robert J. Lifton's 8 criteria of thought reform. And I went one by one through each of his criteria, like milieu control, and each one, and I showed how AA does each one of those. So understanding AA for me through his model for thought reform was incredibly helpful in my deconstruction journey. I'll link that playlist here as well if you want to dive into that playlist. The next one is identify special control mechanisms used in the group. Again, you can use Lifton's criteria for thought reform. This can be really helpful. You can use Stephen Hassan's BITE model and look that up. You can look that up on Google or on ChatGPT or something, or just on his website. And understanding how control mechanisms are used in the group can be incredibly helpful. I did a whole video on emotional manipulation because that was something that was really important to me to understand, like, how did I get conned? So I'll link that here as well if you want to look at 30 ways that people can emotionally manipulate you, including in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then next, map the beliefs that were planted. So this also is super vital. It's like, what did the group tell me that I needed to believe? What was I indoctrinated into believing? Like for me, I literally made a list. And I just did this intuitively the night that I left AA. I was like, what the heck was I believing? Because I suddenly was like, oh my God, it's like, it's a scam. I got conned. So I wrote down a list of everything that I was taught to believe when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. So like, I have a fatal progressive disease. I have a spiritual malady. I need a spiritual experience. I need a personality rearrangement, all this mumbo jumbo. I have a physical allergy. I need a daily reprieve. I need to work with others. My primary purpose is to help alcoholics. So I literally went and I wrote down all of the beliefs that the cult that I was in had me believe. And then I could see them like, in black and white with my critical thinking and like out of my head and on paper and like examine like, what are these beliefs I was believing? So that can be super helpful as a way to start to break when we're cognitively thinking and examining things with what we were indoctrinated into believing inside the group. Next, identify which ones still shape direction. So you can go through that list and see which ones am I still believing are true. And that could be a great place to rabbit hole or to look for other videos on this channel or any channel or read books and see, like, do I find evidence that this is true? So for example, all the beliefs that I just told you that I had in Alcoholics Anonymous, I no longer believe. I do not have a fatal progressive disease. I don't even believe in the word alcoholism. I believe in alcohol use disorder. So I went one by one to all the beliefs that I was indoctrinated into in AA. And then I went, do I still believe these? And also, are they still ruling my life? Like in the beginning, the fear that I would die if I left the group was still really, really implanted deeply in me. And I had a therapist that I work with weekly to help remove the fears of leaving AA, but including the phobia indoctrination that I would die if I left. Then examine black and white thinking that came from the group. So there's a lot of black and white thinking in Alcoholics Anonymous. For example, there's like the alcoholics, which I don't think is a thing, and then the normies, right? Or once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. So on my deprogramming journey, I've really deconstructed black and white thinking in general. Writing down what you're believing that is like in the black and white all or nothing framework can be really helpful to start to liberate some of those from, I guess, controlling our minds, right? That's really what it is. And then identify any fear-based or magical thinking. Cults are really big on magical thinking. I even like breaking down the higher power thing. For me, like writing lists about these things is really helpful, in this second phase of cult recovery is looking at, well, what am I believing? Which is magical thinking? What's like not really true outside of the group? Like outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, there isn't anybody who uses the term real alcoholic, for example. So I was like, okay, so real alcoholic, then I'm powerless. And so I just started deconstructing, like, where do these words come from? Who else uses these words? And specifically with AA for like fear-based, it was like, okay, so there's a disease in the parking lot doing push-ups. Obviously, that's not true. But what they're saying is my disease is getting stronger over time. Like it's even getting stronger sober, which literally makes no sense to me at this point, right? But that was said so much in the rooms. And so when I found the Sinclair method and I learned about how the brain learns and unlearns things with our reward pathways, that helped me deconstruct from this idea that there's like this thing living inside me to be afraid of that at any moment in time is going to pick up a drink, because so much of 12-step ideology is like to be constantly afraid that you only have today and you only have a daily reprieve, and there's something like your brain wants you dead. It's not a safe neighborhood. You shouldn't go there alone. So just getting clear on what it is like, and we don't have to remove them right away, but getting clarity on like, well, what am I believing that's fear-based? What am I believing that's magical thinking? Next is to challenge what's called loaded language that was implanted by the group. So in that playlist that I did for AA, how AA controls your mind, the 8 criteria for Robert J. Lipton's thought reform, one of them is loaded language. It's a great video to watch. I'll link that here. And so the loaded language in AA, it's language that's used by the cult, and some of it is even like to twist the words around. Even the word like relapse has a lot of shame on it, and I don't even use that anymore. But there's so much language that's used by the group that becomes normal when we're a part of it, like spiritual malady, spiritual experience. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with a spiritual experience, but just understanding how, like, the group that you were in, or for me, Alcoholics Anonymous, how it like cult coded everything. So all of a sudden, if I am feeling restless, irritable, or discontented, that is now loaded language, untreated alcoholism, or dry drunk. So those are two examples of loaded language that I don't believe that are based on reality that I've totally deconstructed from. Now, again, obviously, it's not what I think that matters in your own deprogramming journey. This is just what I used to see where I'm at in my own recovery journey, and so that I wanted to share it with you. Okay, so then replace group jargon with neutral language. So I don't use the word alcoholic or alcoholism at all anymore, like I don't believe in them. I will say them like I just did, but it's in reference to the fact that I don't use them or believe in them. I don't use them as they are intended. I use them as a point that I don't to mention that I don't use them, to point out I don't use them, because it was a huge deconstruction for me. I use alcohol use disorder, which is about your pattern of drinking. It's not about all this other stuff that requires a moral inventory and a confession and amends and repentance and all that kind of stuff that AA is involved with. So it can be super helpful to replace the group jargon with neutral language. Then we have practice cognitive diffusion. This thought is not a fact. So, like, the thoughts that I had in the beginning were, it's unsafe to leave the group. I'm going to die if I leave the group. I can't tell anybody. So this one went really deep in me, the anonymity baloney. I felt like I have to stay silent and not talk about my story, not talk about leaving the group, because I owe my anonymity to the group. I don't own my story. I don't own my voice. I have to keep quiet so that I don't like ruin it for the newcomer or all the other. But now I can see that that's like guilt indoctrination of reasons why I have to obey and be obedient and conform to a group that I'm no longer even in. This thought that like I have to stay silent, that's just a thought. And that thought wasn't my thought before I got to AA. I was told I have to be anonymous, right? It's even in the name, Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, so then next is rebuild the ability to hold multiple perspectives at once. So for me, this wasn't a cognitive dissonance, which is where you have two opposing or conflicting ideas at the same time. For me, it was more like, yes, I benefited from AA in some ways. And also, yes, I think it is 100%. It is harmful no matter how you do it. It's inherently harmful because it is about disempowerment. It is about uh, it is about coerced religion. It is about things that are not okay with like who I feel like, we're empowered beings. And so, yes, I got benefit from it is true. And also I would never recommend it personally to somebody else. If somebody's currently in it and they want to do it, great. Do what you want to do. Trust yourself. Just for me, I was figuring out how I feel about it and what's true for me. I don't know what anybody else should do. Literally, just sharing my guilt recovery checklist. But perhaps you do know what you should do, and yet you can trust yourself. You can trust what you feel inside. Next, we have phase 3, which is emotional processing. So, the first thing you can do here is to name the emotions related to leaving. For me, I had a lot of anger. I was really mad at some of the amends that I made. I was really mad at the world. I felt like, y'all, if you didn't know that AA was a con job, like, how did you not see that? Like the professionals, right? Like the mental health professionals and stuff. And if you did see it, even worse, that you sent us there and you let us go rot out in church basements for years, decades, or our entire life. So I was really angry about that. I had a lot of grief. I was really sad about some of the friendships that were no longer because, getting shunned from the tribe. I was really sad that I spent so long in the group. I felt a lot of grief around how long I spent there, like a decade's kind of a long time. I know some people, it doesn't matter if you were only there 3 months or you're there 3 decades or whatever. However your feelings are, you're allowed to have all your feelings, obviously. Felt a lot of shame. I felt humiliated. I felt like, how did I get conned and scammed? And aren't I smart? And like, what happened? And like, I totally got played. So I felt like an idiot. And then I also felt a lot of relief. I was like, oh, okay. So thank God it's over. But then I also felt extremely disoriented. Like, who am I without AA? And if all of that's not true, then what's true now? What's my identity? What's my purpose? And then for me, it was also a lot of emotional regulation and learning. That's when I started to realize that my nervous system, without medicating with alcohol and without medicating with Alcoholics Anonymous, I was like, oh, there's something up with my nervous system. And that's when I realized that I'm autistic and ADHD, and went in for the assessments and got further clarity on my brain, and then got adequate support and optimization for my brain to support myself so that I can thrive without having to do endless pray away the autism inventories and stuff. Next, allow grief for lost years, lost community, and lost identity. It's going to take whatever it takes. And grief is not like linear, right? Like I always think of grief like it comes in waves. It can be like really intense. And so I had a lot of feelings in the beginning. I made a playlist called Grieving AA, which I'll link here as well. And I made that playlist because it goes through one of the models for grief is called like the 5 stages of grief. It's just a model. There's no rules to feelings and healing, right? There is no one way. That is way too culty. There's 6 videos in that playlist. There's like journaling prompts in there too, which is really helpful. So if you're in the middle of grieving AA, that is a great place to start. I'll also link it below. Next is process betrayal trauma, commonly recognized by experts. So I had a lot of betrayal trauma, and maybe that's what you're in right now. Maybe you feel betrayed by your leader, by your friends, by the system, by the program. I felt betrayed by the mental health experts. I'm like the addiction experts. I'm like, if y'all been studying addiction your whole life, why weren't you screaming this from the hilltops in a way where like it could have been accessible to somebody like me? Like before I even went there, like in Hollywood, like why did you put in all the movies that AA is the way when there's all these other paths that are non-harmful that have been around, like rational recovery, smart recovery, those were like from 94. I believe. And so it's like, why is the mainstream narrative in America and maybe even globally pushing AA when it's a harmful cult religion? I also felt betrayed by my sponsor for specific amends that I made in the context of having been SA'd. And so depending upon what your personal experience is, you might be feel betrayed by the literature, by a specific group, a specific person. It's important to look at, and if this is heavy for you, and it might be, and that's fine if it is, honor yourself. Maybe there's a professional, like a therapist, who can help you process through your feelings on this. Next is explore the emotions the group pathologized or suppressed. Okay, so for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, not allowed to feel fear, anger. It's the dubious luxury of normal men. Not allowed to feel resentment. It's the number one offender. Pretty much all of the so-called negative feelings were shunned or suppressed, and really it was about feeling gratitude for a lot of us. Now everybody's different. There's no rules. This is just my experience. So yeah, check out which feelings that the group that you were in might have pathologized or said were bad. So funny because I get trolled a lot, obviously. And a lot of the people who troll me who are inside the AA ideology, they think that they're insulting me by saying, like, you sound angry or you sound resentful. And I'm like, that's not an insult. That's like first of all, I'm not. But second of all, that's not a bad thing. It's like literally, it's not a bad word. Like, it's like they're calling me a bad word. I'm like, I'm not repressing that anymore. Like, I'm allowed to be human. That means I'm going to be all the feels. I'm going to be like all of them. Okay. And then identify trauma responses, fawn, freeze, hypervigilance. So, like, this also was helpful for me to understand how, yeah, to unpack my trauma, to understand how even though I had been working on some of my trauma while I was in AA with a therapist, that, yeah, understand my trauma responses, how I was like fawning with my therapist. I can't remember the name of the book that I read. I will put it here next to my face when I edit this. So you'll be able to see the book that I read that really helped me in case you feel inspired to read it too. And then rebuild emotional self-regulation outside of the group dogma. So for me, I really did get like what AA calls like a daily reprieve from participating in the experience of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like going to the meetings, I felt serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, adrenaline, all of this biochemical experience inside my body from speaking in the meeting, being afraid to speak, then speaking, then haven't spoken, listening to other people, relating to them, talking to newcomers, hearing my story reflected back to me, feeling connected. So there really was a lot of regulation that was happening for me inside the program. And so learning to build that outside the program. Again, that's also when I was learning that I was neurodivergent because I was like, whoa, I'm so different. Like without alcohol and out Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm so different that I'm actually just different. Like there's something else going on here. Totally spitting on my computer. Let's move on. But for me personally, because I was already so like dysregulated, I'd already been working on emotional regulation for a very long time by the point I left AA. In fact, when I was 2.5 years sober, I started teaching emotional self-regulation. I started holding weekly events in my living room at first, and then I taught at Sober Living's house, and then I put it on the internet. I would teach about emotional regulation, mindfulness, meditation, because I struggled with it so much. So I started learning about it, and then I started teaching it to help other people. So I was already skilled with emotional regulation, which a lot of us are when we leave AA, and you may or may not be, and you may need new skills. You may need to up your skills. You may need new things. So yeah, it could be that part of your cult recovery is filling your toolbox with more emotional regulation tools. Next is learn. Oh, and I will say I do have something called the Roadmap to Freedom. I'll put a link for it below. And that Roadmap to Freedom is like a 40-minute training about nervous system regulation that I did, that if it's something that you're interested in, you'll totally love. Okay, next, learn non-group based grounding skills. So this is similar. Some people like that 3, 3, and 3, right? What's 3 things you see? Look around the room. I see a lamp. I see a microphone. I see my tea. What are 3 things that you can like taste or smell? It's like, I smell my tea. I smell food cooking. Whatever, right? And then touch. Okay, so I'm touching the glass. I'm touching the microphone. Can I do that? I'm touching the desk. And just ground yourself, like find practices that you can ground yourself. It's really easy to Google what are grounding practices, right? Or ask ChatGPT. But learn grounding techniques that can help you as you stabilize and balance yourself after a cult, like Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, next is reduced internalized self-monitoring learned by the group. Okay, this is the biggest game changer. I did not police myself constantly before I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was indoctrinated into this like rigorous honesty, constantly examining myself all the time, every day. Every feeling had to be like inventoried. What's my part? How am I being self-centered here? What do I want? How was I trying to play God in the play of life or like whatever, right? And so it's been so liberating to not do this anymore. And it's a journey, but to not to literally change my brain from the constant self-policing to a brain that's not doing that. And so what that looks like practically is like when I notice that I'm doing it, I just give myself permission. And my favorite way to give myself permission to let go is just put my hand on my heart. Let's do it now. Take a breath. Exhale. Let's do 2 more. Inhale. Exhale. Let's take another breath through the nose. Inhale. And exhale. If your eyes were closed like mine, go ahead and open them. So every time I take 3 breaths, I feel a little more grounded, a little more in my parasympathetic nervous system, and a little more out of my thoughts. Now, this is meant to be like a grounding technique, and everyone's going to have a different one or different ones that they go to. For me, my 3 breaths is always my favorite go-to, just to kind of like ground myself in the moment and be like, all right, let's come back. Next is explore suppressed anger without shame. We're allowed to feel angry. In fact, if you are just realizing you're leaving a cult, anger is a very appropriate response. It is a phase of grief, and there's a lot of grief when you're leaving a cult like Alcoholics Anonymous or any 12-step cult or any cult, period. So yeah, explore suppressed anger without shame. We don't have to feel bad about it. Why would you feel bad about how you actually are? We actually are angry. We are joyful. We are happy. We are sad. We are all the things. That's what being a human is. We are allowed to have all the feelings. Calling me angry is not an insult. I am angry, like some flavor of angry, probably every day, if we're going to include impatient, disappointed, because there's like the main feelings, then there's all the subtle feelings to them. I have no problem with being angry. Generally, I'm not, but when I am, I am. I'm not going to like throw sugar over it. I feel like a lot of the gratitude list for when you're angry and finding your part, it's kind of like putting whipped cream on a pile of poo and saying it's sweet. It's like, no, that's sweet poo. That's gratitude on anger, and we're allowed to feel angry. Next is build tolerance for decision-making without external authority. This one, I didn't even realize I was struggling with decision-making. I mean, I did, but I didn't really get that it was related to leaving AA. Because remember, I did like deprogramming stuff for like a year. I read the orange papers. I did a lot of research. And then I moved on with my life and didn't think about it again. I was studying autism. I was kind of in a different vibe for like a long time. And then 4 years later, after I stopped deprogramming actively, I decided to dissent on the internet, right? And that was April 5 years after I left April 6, 2025, I was like, I got to talk about this stuff. This is ridiculous. I need to talk about it online. And so ever since I've been talking about it online, I've gone deeper into the work. And that's when I realized that my decision-making was still wonky, was still disabled is the word that feels right to me. It was still disabled from AA because AA systematically, and I'm not sure what cult you were in, if it was another 12-step cult or what, but a lot of cults, including AA, systematically disable our critical thinking. It's how they get us, our decision-making, how they get us to stay stuck in the group. So first, it's like Bill says he created dependence of the newcomer on the sponsor, then on the group, and then on the doctrine, basically the big book, and then on a higher power. And so I was constantly, especially in the beginning, asking my sponsor for direction because I was told I had to, and I was obedient eventually. I capitulated, I complied. And then I was constantly praying for guidance. So I'm always like asking or looking outside of myself or compare or inside the group think and using my decision making by the group think. So reclaiming that and literally rewiring my brain. Every once in a while, like a prayer will still happen. And I'm not saying anyone needs to not be religious or pray. I don't know what you should do. All I know is I was not religious at all. I did not pray at all before I got to AA, and AA changed my brain into a brain that prayed all the time. That was the conditioning I had, or the indoctrination, the brainwashing, if you will. The thought reform, the mind control, whatever word you please want to use. And so for me, it's like, no, I don't need to pray. I don't need to ask somebody else. I don't need to realizing that, no, I can decide what feels right to me. And if I'm not sure in any clarity, maybe I want to journal. Maybe I want to go for a walk. Maybe I want to do research. So figuring out a way that I can make a decision and bringing that agency back into my life. Because what cults do is they strip us of our agency, our autonomy, or even in AA, it directly says to turn your will and your life over to God, to a higher power. Next is phase 4. Phase 4 is identity reconstruction. So first is separate your personal identity from the group identity. Now, I don't know what you should do, obviously, but what that meant for me leaving AA was no longer identifying with I'm an alcoholic, which if you haven't been to an AA meeting, you certainly know that's what we do. Hello, I'm Kirsten. I'm an alcoholic, right? That's standard coercion is to get us to say that. So me looking at the word alcoholic and looking into alcoholism and addiction helped me realize that I don't even believe in that term, period, let alone that I am that term, let alone that I want to tie my identity to something dysfunctional from my past, a habit that I had that was a very serious habit and a very bad habit, right? It was very destructive at the end for me. So when I was in AA, they called me a real alcoholic until I left AA and said, I don't believe in all of them. They're like, you are never a real alcoholic, right? That's the loaded language. But so for me, disidentifying with the group, like literally with the group identity that locked me into the ideology, the I'm an alcoholic, was very liberating for me. It's not required. You, like, let's say that you are in AA and you're deprogramming AA. Maybe you do feel like you're an alcoholic and that does feel right to you and you do want to stick with that. Then do it. Trust yourself. I don't know what you should do. We're just going through a checklist. Okay, next. Identify roles you held in the group, sponsor, leader, servant, etc. So for sure, like, I mean, this was me. I was a sponsor. I was a chair. I was a secretary. I greeted the newcomers. I did H&I, like whatever. Part of why it's good to reflect on the roles you had in the group is to look at, and this comes a little bit later, is like, are you recreating those roles right now? Who were you without those roles? So next we look at exploring who you were before the group. Now, because I was in AA for so long, and I joined AA in 2009, so I am not the same person, and I wouldn't be without AA. If I had never gone to AA, I wouldn't be the same person in 2025 that I was in 2009, right? We evolve, we mature, all of the things. But I find that now, after AA and after a lot of deprogramming, I'm more similar to who I was before I ever joined than to who I was when I was in the group. I definitely took on what's called like a cult personality, which is, where certain feelings are allowed, certain ways of thinking are allowed, like the group think. And so who are you before the group? And then explore who are you without the group. This one can hit deep, so have fun with this one. These could be great journaling questions. So if this is something that you haven't done and you're not clear on, really, it's just like check it and it could be on a list, right? Okay. Next is reconnect with suppressed desires, hobbies, and preferences. Now, a lot of us, me specifically, my hobby before I went to AA was drinking. I was drinking. I'd go with friends and we'd get drinks, and that's what I did. I drank. That's why I ended up in AA. So maybe you never really had hobbies, and that's fine. Or maybe you had a lot of hobbies and you didn't have time for them when you were in a cult. Also understandable. Cults exhaust us by taking up a lot of our time, and they exploit us for free labor. All of those meetings, all of the sponsorship hours, all of the time, the service commitments, all of the things. And so when I was drinking, my hobby basically was drinking. I mean, I went to the gym. I was in college. Like, I was doing other things. I was going to work. But my hobby basically was drinking. And then when I was in Alcoholics Anonymous, my main hobby was Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, you get off work and then you go to AA, and then what time is left? Then you're on the phone with a newcomer or something. So there can be, and this is one of my favorite parts of leaving a cult, how much time we have. So it can feel overwhelming at first. And if that's what you're at, I totally get it. But it's also such a delight to start to notice, like, the way that I figure out what my hobbies are, I notice what I'm interested in. What feels good? What's fun? What lights me up? Like, maybe that's dancing. Maybe it's painting. Maybe it's joining like a group, like to play chess or like a book club or a yoga community or whatever. So start to notice what you desires that you had before maybe, or desires that you would like to cultivate, or even you can pick a hobby that you want. Maybe you want to pick woodworking or crocheting or needle pointing or collecting something. I don't know. If you're really stumped here, you can Google like WTF are great hobbies for somebody like me, and you can put in some information or ask ChatGPT. Have fun with it. I feel like so much of this like deconstruction journey, and when we move into reconstruction, this is like reconstruction, right? It's like, what do I want to try and explore that? So I've tried a lot of things after AA, like, do I like this? Do I like this? Like one of the things I did is so I love herbal teas. So like right now oh, I just dropped it in there. Well, I have a little tea in there. So I went to herb school and I was like, every Sunday we were in the garden, digging in the garden, and we were learning all about plant medicines like herbal teas and concoctions and tinctures and stuff. And that was a lot of fun to learn more about like, yeah, how we can use plants to heal or to support ourselves, to support our nervous system, to regulate us. Yeah, plant allies. It's a vibe. So I wouldn't necessarily call like plants like a hobby, but definitely when I was in herb school and I was trying out all different kinds of teas and making my own blends based upon the different properties, like this is a nervine, this is an adaptogen. So just fun things to get into. Like, I don't know, maybe you're into tea too. Let me know in the comments. Let's move on. Next is rebuild self-trust. This is like crucial because a lot of what is disabled in cults, and for me specifically with Alcoholics Anonymous, was self-trust. So if I'm always being obedient to the big book, to the ideology, to the groupthink, to a sponsor, to the elders, the old timers, to a higher power, then I'm not trusting myself. And so this is a rewiring thing again. My brain was wired to be inside the ideology, and then it can, by repetition, by going all the time and hearing the same things all the time. Remember, the way that cults indoctrinate us is with words. They don't use guns, right? They use words. It's the slogans. It's the language. It works if you work it. So then we start to think it's going to work, right? Because you keep hearing that every day. Keep coming back. It worked. So then we need to reprogram ourselves or reconstruct ourselves. And so every time I notice that I'm not trusting myself, it's like, oof, here's the moment right here to do the rewiring. What would it look like if I trust myself? What do I want? What feels right to me? And yes, we have permission to make mistakes. It's a learning process. It's a practice, not a perfect. Okay, next is practice independent choice making. It's basically what I just said. Next is reclaim your own moral compass. So maybe you had to do all these moral inventories if you were in a church basement like I was, like Alcoholics Anonymous. So yeah, what are your morals? Who are you without the group? What feels right to you? Something that I love doing in general is looking at like, what are my values? What are my top values? What values do I want to live by? And then creating that for myself, not to have a group or a society to put the values on me, but who am I? Like what values do I want to honor? Next is rebuild personal autonomy in areas the group controlled. So you can make a list of areas of your life that the group controlled if this is what's vibing with you, and then figure out what would autonomy look like here. Even though I'm not in the group or I'm leaving the group, how is it still influencing these areas of my life? And what do I actually want? If I was in control, if I get to decide and choose, what might that look like? And then if we know like we're here and we want to be here, then we can start making the moves to get to the new place, the autonomous place, the freedom place. All right, next. Identify where you may be recreating group roles in new environments. So maybe you were a sponsor, maybe you were a sponsee, maybe you had a service position in AA, or maybe in whatever cult you were in, you were doing something. So are you creating the same cult dynamics outside of the cult because you're just practicing what you were doing in the group, and that you're doing that outside of the group? So just become aware if the cult is still alive in you in other areas. I think it's a really good thing to be aware of, and then decide, does this make sense to me? Is this what I want to do? How do I want to participate? What do I want to create? Next is phase 5, which is social reconnection. So here is about rebuilding social networks outside of the group. This can feel impossible for a lot of us, or like, how do I even make a friend? Obviously, we're older than when we joined AA or the cult, and it's sometimes people find it's easier to make friends when they're younger. Now, it's not a rule, obviously, but in cults, it's really easy to make friends. We'll do air quotes for friends, right? Because when you leave, you find out that most likely you don't get to keep them. They're not really your friends. They are bonded. Their loyalty is to the system, not to the individual. It's not personal. They're devoted to a system. In my case, they were devoted to AA. So if I leave AA, their devotion wasn't to me. Our friendship was conditional on me believing what they believe, which is the cult ideology or the 12 steps. Next, learn how to form relationships without hierarchy or confession. You know what's so weird is I didn't tell everybody all of my secrets before I went to AA ever. No. I mean, I kept things close to my chest. I had no problem with that. And so we get so used to like confessing our deepest secrets all the time to everybody in cults like Alcoholics Anonymous. So I love this one, the invitation to be learning how to make relationships that don't have the hierarchy, like I'm an old timer or I have more sober time or I'm a sponsor, therefore I have more say and more authority than you. It's like, no, let's have the same, let's be the same. And I don't have to confess everything to you, but I can if I feel like it, but no coerced confession. Yeah, total vibe. Next is address difficulty trusting due to betrayal trauma. So a lot of us feel this. We feel like a sense of, oh, I mean, it's a big one because relationships in the group, and we look back at how we were treated or mistreated, and with a new lens, understanding that the group is a cult and what the dynamics were and being able to see them clearly can bring up a lot. I know for me, I was very hesitant for a very long time to be in any group at all or to lead any group. I didn't want to be a leader and I didn't want to be a follower at all. I was like PTSD about it. I was like, I'm not doing it. And I would even join groups and be like, And so I just have worked through a lot of discernment, I guess, and trust in my instincts so that now I can join groups and now I can lead groups because I'm no longer afraid that I'm no longer projecting that every group isn't safe and I can't trust, right? So for me, that one's really true. Now, of course, all these might not be relevant for you, but that one came up for me. I was like hesitant on groups just because I'd been in a group for 10 and a half years that was a scam. So I was like cautious, but a little bit too cautious because I was like, I don't know, kind of like post cult vibes. So it's okay to be where you are. Just where you are is where you are. And we're looking at ways to possibly move forward. Next is build friendships based on mutuality, not service. Yeah, we don't always have to be of service. Like in AA, we were conditioned that basically our worth is dependent upon how much of service we are, right? So I love this one. Set boundaries without guilt. This is a game changer. Now, I knew this one before I left AA. I learned this one in Chiang Mai, Thailand, on the top of Doi Suthep, like outside of, I was at a monastery there doing a Vipassana, a silent meditation retreat. And I had this experience when I was deep in meditation where I was feeling guilt. And I realized that I had never really allowed guilt to be in my body without it controlling me. So what I learned was that, and I'll try to say it briefly here so we can keep going. It's a much bigger lesson that I'm happy to make a whole other training on. But what I realized is that when someone's using guilt to control me, whether they're conscious of it or not, or whether I'm feeling guilt and it's controlling me, whether I understand where that guilt came from or who conditioned that into me, like the cult, it's to allow the guilt to be in my body, to exist. So when I feel guilty, instead of not doing something or doing something and letting the guilt direct my action, to me, guilt is like a pause, close my eyes, notice where it is, breathe. And I just notice the guilt. Where is it? Literally, I have feelings in my body that I'm calling guilt. Where are they? Are they in my belly? What do I notice in my body right now? And I just try to notice any sensations or feelings in my body with my mind, like a mindfulness practice. I call it like mindful embodiness. Like, where is that guilt? I feel guilt. Is it in my throat? Is it in my heart? Is it in my chest? And then I just breathe and notice where it is. And then I open my eyes and I'm usually pretty centered at that point and the guilt's passed through me. And then I can consciously and deliberately choose what action I want to take without the guilt controlling me. Whether the guilt was indoctrinated into me from the cult that I was in, Alcoholics Anonymous, or whether somebody is currently using guilt to get me to behave a certain way or to not behave a certain way. So changing our relationship with guilt can be a huge game changer, especially after leaving a high control cult religion. Next, disengage from people who reenact group dynamics. Saying no is totally a vibe. Next, choose communities that reinforce autonomy, not obedience. 100% autonomy is the vibe. Learn how to say no without fear. It's even okay if you feel fear. Often, when I say no or place a boundary, I feel a feeling. I feel uncomfortable. That is like old stuff in me. I still will say no, but I'm going to feel a type of way while I do it. I might feel guilty. I might feel bad. I might have a feeling. But if it's a no, it's a no. And I'm just going to say no and then allow my emotional world to do whatever it does. And let's say that takes 20 seconds, especially if I'm mindful with what I'm feeling. 20 seconds, maybe 30, maybe 90 max if I close my eyes and notice where that fear is or that guilt or whatever, and then let the feeling blow through me. And let's say it was 90 seconds that it took for that feeling to pass through me. That's a small price tag for a boundary to honor yourself. I will always place the boundary to honor myself, and I will pay, like I'm doing air quotes, right? Pay the 90 seconds of feeling that discomfort or that sensation inside my body, that price tag of having a boundary. It's totally worth it. Next is behavioral unlearning. Let's go. Identify automatic behaviors instilled by the group. For me, I've already mentioned like prayer was like an automatic behavior. So think about through your life, what are you doing automatically or just notice it throughout the day that came from the group? And then you get to be in choice, agency. Do I want to continue to do this or do I want to rewire it? So when that automatic behavior starts, pause. Okay, come back to choice. What do I want to do? For me, a lot of it really is a rewiring game. We got thought reformed in the cult by the repetition. And then when we come out, we actively work with that thought reform to remove it by recognizing it and choosing something different, which is going to help rewire our brains. Next, replace group rituals with self-directed routines. Fun. Enjoy. Next, remove compulsive service impulses. Your time is for you. You get to choose. You can serve because you want to, not because you have to. Stop feeling responsible for strangers. This is a game changer. Side note, I'm still working through this. Interrupt people-pleasing learned in the group. Ultimate game changer. This goes back to what we learned about boundaries and the willingness of being able to feel your feelings in the moment of discomfort while you actively do not people please or do not do things that you don't want to do. Total game changer. Next, reduce compulsive overwork or hyperperformance. Totally a vibe, but also maybe you do want to work a lot and that's okay. But are you compulsively not feeling or are you choosing? If you're in choice, it's a vibe. If you're being run by the indoctrination, I'd say that's not a vibe, but that's up for you to decide. Okay, phase out self-sacrifice as a default identity. So this one was big for me in AA, self-sacrifice as the identity. This doctrine, this idea, this conditioning went deep in a lot of us in AA or in 12-step for sure for me. Next, challenge guilt when you rest or enjoy yourself. We're allowed to rest. We are allowed to have fun. Some people have no problem with this. Other people, it is something to work towards, to relax our system, to create time, to not have to be productive. Next, practice low stakes boundaries setting. So if boundaries are really hard, you can start with smaller ones. You could even think of them in advance, or you can do them in easier ways like via email or via text. Next, develop new sources of meaning not tied to martyrdom. Yeah, I'm into this one. And finally, we're at phase 7, which is the last phase, long-term integration. So create a long-term worldview independent of the group language. So much of how I saw the world, even after a year or 2 years of leaving AA, was still through AA ideology. I recognized the baloney, the myths that I was powerless, that I was fatally progressive disease, that I had character defects that needed to be inventoried all the time. Otherwise, I was going to be a dry drunk, all that stuff. So that was gone, but I still had a lot of my worldview was still from the group. Now, you might choose to keep it. You're allowed to keep whatever you want. This is take what you want and deprogram the rest. Next, build a life philosophy rooted in free thinking. Or critical thinkers now out here. No more groupthink. Thank you very much. Integrate your past without centering on it. So deprogramming doesn't have to be forever. Maybe you want to become a professional deprogrammer. Then it can be forever part of what you do. But we don't have to center on our past anymore. Like for me in the cult I was in, AA, it was centered on, and I'm an alcoholic. And then I have to always work with so-called alcoholics and stuff like that. Next, let the group become one part of your story, not the entire story. Facts. Next, strengthen identity, continuity, past, present, and future. Disentangle purpose from group duty. The primary purpose in AA is that you're supposed to help an alcoholic who is still struggling, suffering. And you might want to still help people who struggle with addiction. I mean, technically, right here, right now, I'm helping somebody who at one point struggled with addiction, right? You get to choose. The whole point is it's not that what you learned or were thought reformed in the cult is wrong. The whole point is you get to choose. So what the heck happened and what do you actually want to move forward with it? What am I going to take with me? And then what do I want to deprogram? What's good, what's not? It's kind of like an inventory, right? Because some things that we did learn in our cult are actually things that can actually help us and we want to keep them. And some things are incredibly harmful and we want to get rid of them. All right, now develop personal meaning that doesn't involve saving others. Yes, this one went so deep into me because I really believed that my whole worthiness was around my service in AA. So maybe this wasn't something that impacted you, but for sure, this is a big one for some of us. Next, build future goals unrelated to the group. A whole vibe. Next, reorient your work towards what you value. Yes, a lot of us got jobs that were inspired from the cult that we were in, and maybe we want to relook at how we're spending our time, who we're spending our time with, how we're thinking, what our worldview is, what our work is, all of the things. Next, cultivate self-directed creativity. Fun. Next, assess whether you've recreated group dynamics elsewhere. So again, this is looking at maybe what were your roles, but also what were you conditioned to believe in the cult? And are you recreating any of that elsewhere? And maybe it's beyond what your roles were, which we discussed earlier, but maybe it's around being hyper self-critical, constantly inventorying yourself, constantly working on yourself, whatever feels true to you here. Next, design your next chapter from autonomy, not fear. We get to choose. It's all about conscious choice. All right, next, continue learning about undue influence and maintain awareness. So yeah, I love reading cult literature. I love reading deprogramming type books. I love reading all the things that can help wake up more pockets of freedom. I actually have put together all the books on Amazon, organize them in lists, and I'll put below, you'll see my deprogram books down there. There's a link to it you'll be able to see everything that I recommend. So whether you're looking at deprogramming from AA or waking up critical thinking or cult recovery, there's all sorts of books in there that have been super helpful for me. Put them down there. Also, feel free to leave a comment of a book that's been really helpful for you. We can, share the vibes. And the last one here is to reclaim joy, individuality, and freedom potentially as core values. I mean, you have the freedom to pick whatever core values you want, but you can pick individuality if you want. You can pick freedom and you can pick joy. Team freedom up in here. Anybody else in team freedom? Let me know in the comments. All right, so this has been pretty extensive. It's been a long video. If you are still here, you made it. And I hope this has been really helpful for you. I wanted to just sit down and make it all in one video so you can go through, pause it, come back to it, whatever, and have it be comprehensive to give you an idea of where you are at in a potential roadmap to healing from cults, healing from AA, 12-step healing from any cult, and recovering back to yourself and creating your next life. So for me, what I did is I wrote down all the ones that were true for me and I put them into a list. And so I feel like I have like a little bit of like the next phase in my journey of healing, like what I want to focus on and what I want to reconstruct and build. And yeah, I'm not worried about how long it takes. I'm not worried about which one I'm going to do first. I just made the list and then I have it. So I can look at the list and just start getting that into my consciousness around like these are some of the things that are left over that I still have in me from AA ideology that I want to remove and I want to rebuild and deconstruct. The way it'll work for me is I'll probably look at the list occasionally every morning, a couple of times a week, whatever it is. And that will seed into my mind things that I want to kind of open up to evolve through. So whether I read books on that or whether I do searches or Googles or whether I create myself checklists and, I like to do a lot of the stuff myself. That's just kind of how I am. I don't know what that's about, but that's always been my vibe. I really like to go into rabbit holes and evolve. So yeah, so that's it. That's the cult recovery checklist. I hope you got a lot of value out of this and let me know what you think in the comments and maybe what popped out. If you want to share what you're working on right now, you can. I pointed out a couple that I'm working on right now or that I realize that are forefront to me. All right. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Sobriety Bestie podcast. I can't wait to hear from you in the comments, to hear how your deprogramming journey is going. And remember, there is so much more freedom available for you. I believe that wholeheartedly, that there is more freedom available for all of us. So take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.